Hey, what's up? This is Phoenix and welcome back to my channel. I encourage you to hit that like button, to subscribe, and to share with your friends. I am very excited to upgrade and update my channel, and this will include much content to come. So I'm definitely working on coming up with the best videos that I can. My goal for 2020 is to reach up to 200 subscribers, so definitely tell your friends and help spread the word. Right now, I am working on my Philosopher series, which will include my discussions of different philosophers throughout time. And I'm very excited for this. I've already had one video where I discussed philosophy from my perspective, and I definitely very much enjoyed that. And you can see that on my playlist in my Philosopher series. And the video is called What is Philosophy? And I focus on varying definitions of what philosophy is, and I talk about what philosophy means to me. So definitely check that out. Today, I'm going to talk about the Presocratic philosophers. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Now, the Presocratics were often contemporary with Socrates. The term Presocratic is a little bit misleading because it often implies that that people came before Socrates, if it has the word pre as a prefix, and that can get a little bit confusing, but suffice to say, the Presocratics were about the time of Socrates and as well as before, and they definitely focused on a lot of different things from Socrates. Socrates, who inspired Plato and Aristotle, was focused a lot on moral philosophy, Plato of which focused on politics and moral philosophy as well, and even though Aristotle went into other concerns, he often did focus on politics and ethics as well. And so this was definitely the long line of tradition that we had, but the Presocratics were a little bit different from this. The Presocratics focused a lot on what could be called cosmology, so they focused a lot on trying to explain the world. They were the first to break away from the poets, such as Homer, and instead of focusing on myth to explain the world, they focused on tangible details. They focused on grounding their explanations in the world and trying to explain the universe by what seemed a little bit more intuitive and common sense rather than something a little bit more obscure and esoteric. The Presocratics might be a little bit esoteric to our taste nowadays, but the Presocratics are very interesting philosophically and in terms of the history of philosophy because they really kick-started a new tradition. They were the first to be scientific in their approach and to ask different questions and to try to understand what the world was, besides just using metaphor. And so this was very unprecedented. Now, supposedly the first Presocratic philosopher was Thales, and there is a funny anecdote about Thales falling into a well and seeing water all around him and thus saying, "Philosophy was born and the world is made up of water." Now, of course, it's definitely a joke. Although the anecdote could be vaguely true. I mean, who knows about these things historically. But Thales was interesting because he did posit that the first principle was water, that water made up everything, and that water was the first principle and was what existence was. And this actually makes a lot of intuitive sense because we do see water everywhere. And so you can imagine when the early Greek philosophers were thinking about the world, they were thinking about water, and they were thinking about how much water composed things, and that seemed to be a reasonable first principle. Of course, we wouldn't look at this so metaphorically and say the world is literally just being water. We wouldn't say that the world, the planet Earth, is on water, which was a little bit more of what Thales supposedly said. But regardless, it's definitely an interesting idea for thinking about first principles and how we construct our definitions and models of the world. It's definitely a very fascinating thing. And the biggest principle to take away from Thales is that it was the beginning of postulating theories, it was the beginning of looking at the world and seeing what the world was, and definitely exploring the world with reason and with science, and with first-hand observation. So this is very interesting to think about. And as I would say, this approach definitely was more scientific, not just with Thales, but also with Democritus, who focused a lot on the world as being made up of atoms. He said that the world is made up of atoms and the void. And this is definitely interesting to think about because atoms are one of the fundamental components of quantum mechanics that are studied. And even though obviously Democritus was theorizing about these things that he couldn't observe with powerful machines, he was definitely on the verge of uncovering what the world is made up of. that the world was made up of atoms, that the world was divisible. And this theme of divisibility versus indivisibility is a very common theme throughout pre-Socratic philosophy. As you get from somebody like Parmenides, you realize that the world is indivisible, the world is one, the world is whole, there is only one universe, and that universe is everything. While with someone like Heraclitus, you get the idea that there is nothing but change, that everything is constructed according to change, and according to what changes. So these are some of the theories that were postulated, and as you can tell, they might be a little bit abstract and different from what we are used to hearing about nowadays in our explanations of the world, but you can definitely see how they are influential and how they kick-started Western philosophy. There is also Zeno and Pythagoras, Zeno of which focused on his paradoxes, specifically with infinity, and his question is infinity divisible? And he focused on this through his colorful examples, which you can definitely look up. They are very interesting examples. And it's very interesting to think about how maybe infinity is not divisible. And it's a very interesting idea to consider. There was also Pythagoras, and even though Pythagoras was not necessarily focusing so much on numbers the way we might imagine now, with certain ways of looking at the world, he definitely focused a lot on thinking about how, at least according to source material, that he focused on number. He focused on understanding the world through abstract symbols, through numbers. And this is a very interesting way of looking at the world. And I find it to be very valuable with thinking about life as being symmetrical, as being ordered, as being mathematical. These are definitely very powerful ideas, and while they are not all attributed to Pythagoras, according to source material, there is definitely a lot there that can be explored. The idea of the world being made up of numbers has not only inspired mathematicians throughout the ages, but has also inspired philosophers such as Whitehead and Frege, who thought a lot about the world as being made up of number, and the world as being abstract in that way. Now, these are definitely a lot of theories, and there are a lot of ways of looking at the world, and there are a lot of ways of exploring the world. And this is one of the reasons why I like philosophy and why I like the Presocratics. I think they were going into very unique territory, especially for their time, and were trying to understand the world in a very unique and interesting way. And I find that to be very, very valuable and powerful. And so the way that the Presocratics influenced me is to look at the world in a speculative and enthusiastic and curious way. And while many of these, at least some of the Presocratics might be more materialist in their approach, there is definitely a way in which you can ground yourself in physical details. Often we feel too mediated by our minds, and we often are unaware of what is going on in the world around us, and grounding ourselves and being more concrete in the world. And so the Presocratics have a little bit of a balance of abstraction as well as material explanations for things. It is a very great way of looking at the world, to have a little bit of abstraction and creativity, but also grounding yourself in facts and important details in the world. And so the Presocratics have always filled me with wonder. They are not the easiest to understand. This is one of their books, by the way, and you can get this from Penguin Classics edition, where they have early Greek philosophy, which includes the Presocratics. And there's definitely a lot there for you to peruse. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this talk on the Presocratics. I'm definitely putting a lot into my channel, and I hope that you will support it. And I hope that you will check out my other videos and keep a lookout for the Philosopher series, which I will keep working on, and I will keep posting. And I will keep making new content. So let's get this going. Let's focus on these wonderful things, these wonderful truths in our reality, and let's get going. This is Phoenix, and thank you for watching.